Sounds good. Alrighty, everybody. Good evening. I'm Izzy from the city of Sunnyvale, and I'll be moderating tonight's program with my colleague Andrea from the city of San Mateo. Along with our co-sponsor, Bosca, and our instructor, Suzanne Bontempo, I want to welcome you all to our class. Before we begin the program, I'm going to provide some guidelines for successful participation in the webinar. First, all attendees are muted by default to reduce background noise to the presentation. We will be pausing periodically throughout the presentation to allow for pertinent questions. However, we encourage you to save any questions that you have that do not need immediate attention until the end. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so in one of two ways. The first option is to use the raise hand feature. I will then call upon you and unmute you to ask your question. And the second option is to type your answer or the question in the Q&A. I will then read the questions to our instructor or respond directly in the chat. And as you can see, this illustration shows where you can find the raise hand button in the Q&A. And I'd also like to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on Bosca's website. Okay. Now that we have that out of the way, I would like to share a little background information on Bosca's landscape education program. Bosca is a special district that represents the interests of 26 cities, water districts, and private water companies, all of which purchase wholesale water from the San Francisco Regional Water Center. Bosca member agencies collectively serve over 1.8 million residents and 40,000 businesses in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. Bosca's goal is to ensure a reliable supply of high quality water at a fair price for their agencies and customers. While we have made significant strides in water use efficiency in the past decade, there's still more room for improvement. Outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation in the Bosca service area. Outdoor water use reduction through the use of water efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water and ensure that future water supply needs of our communities are met. A few highlights on additional conservation programs that may be of interest to you. Bosca also has the iHeart Gray Water program, which gives residents up to $200 in rebates for connecting a washing machine to a gray water irrigation system. Next, there's the Bosca Lawn Be Gone rebate, which gives residents various rebates for transforming their lawns and making them more water efficient. For more information on that, please visit Bosca's website. A new addition for Bosca is the Smart Controller program, which provides instant rebates and heavily discounted pricing on purchase of the Ratio 3 irrigation controller. This controller can be operated on your smartphone and normally retails for $280. Through this program, customers of participating water agencies can purchase a controller for $100 plus tax. There is also an optional rain garden rebate program in which all garden projects that meet the minimum requirements will be rebated or given money back $300. For more information or to find out which of these programs are available in your area, visit bayareaconservation.org. The city of Sunnyvale encourages you to participate in rebate programs offered by Valley Water. We offer $2 per square foot of rebates for replacing your lawns and plants that require a lot of water with drought-tolerant plants or permeable hardscapes. We also offer up to $200 in rebates for properties that connect a clothes washer to a gray water irrigation system. In order to qualify for these rebates, please make sure you apply first. It's a very common mistake that residents get super excited about the rebates and forget that they have to apply first before transforming their lawn. Also, are you looking for compost? Free compost and mulch are available for Sunnyvale residents at the Smart Station. Stop by Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with your own shovel and container.
Great, and I'm going to highlight some opportunities to save water and money in the city of San Mateo. Cal Water is your water provider. If you're a San Mateo resident, you can get a free conservation kit that includes a garden hose nozzle with a shutoff valve, high efficiency shower heads, and faucet aerators and more. And then similarly, there are specific rebates available through Cal Water for high efficiency appliances like toilets, clothes washers, and then another similar program with a smart irrigation controller. And Cal Water is currently operating their lawn to garden program, which is a turf replacement program, and that also offers a bonus rebate if you convert your spray irrigation to drip irrigation. And then if you are a San Mateo resident, you're eligible for Bosca rain barrel rebates. Next slide, please. There are a lot of resources on how to save water and design your garden yourself. And so we wanted to highlight two very important online resources. This one is with Valley Water. It's the southbaygreengardens.org website. There are videos at the watersavings.org website. So there are lots of resources out there to help you get some ideas on landscape designs and then even templates. And that can help you utilize those rebates we just talked about. And on the next slide, there's another WaterWise gardening website at www.bayareagardening.org. This includes a gallery of gardens and plant lists, which I know are super helpful if you're trying to figure out what to plant in your garden, and a watering calculator as well. And now, thank you so much for listening to our introduction here, but I have the honor of introducing Suzanne Bontempo. Suzanne has worked as an environmental educator and integrated pest management advocate. She's the owner of Plant Harmony and program manager for Our Water, Our World. She was recognized for excellence in her field, winning a 2013 Integrated Pest Management Innovators Award. Suzanne has worked in the horticulture industry for over 20 years in a variety of capacities with landscape contractors, leading garden maintenance teams, and in resource management. Suzanne loves plants, nature, and ensuring any information she can for helping others have success in their garden and solve pest issues with a less toxic approach. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Suzanne to take it away.
Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here, and I just am so happy that you're all here to join us this evening. This is one of my most favorite topics to talk about. I have a lot of information prepared for you, so let's get started. I will be going through slides for a good solid hour, maybe not quite an hour and a half, but I just like to, put those expectations out there. What we're going to learn is I'm going to review the principles of integrated pest management, or IPM. We're going to look at the action steps in IPM, and those are called controls. And then, because that's really the foundation. And then we're just going to take a little break for 3 minutes just to stand up and stretch and maybe get another glass of water and to take a couple deep breaths, because that's already a lot. And then we're going to dive into how we apply integrated pest management to the pest problems that we might see around the home and garden. And then I'm going to walk through managing some of the common pests that we would see this time of year. And so let's get started by talking about what is integrated pest management, or IPM. So integrated pest management is a decision-making process. When we see a pest problem, we want to always take a pause and go through some decision-making. We're always going to use science-based strategies. We're going to look at the home or the garden as a whole, as a complete environment, to identify what is really going on, what is the problem. Because oftentimes when we see a problem, a pest, it's symptoms of something else. So that's why we want to take a pause and really get curious and dive a little deeper. And then once we can identify what the problem is, we ask ourselves, is this something that we can live with? How much damage can we and the plant or the environment tolerate? And then from there, if we need to take some action, we will go through the action steps. So identification, then we can look into some preventative means, But then the action steps are going to be cultural controls, increasing the health of the environment, mechanical controls or physical controls. These are the tools that we use to manage the pest problems. Biological controls, which are the living organisms that we use to manage the pest problem. And then chemical controls, which are the pesticides. And we're always going to use these as a last resort when we've exercised all of the other steps and exhausted all the other options. Another way of looking at IPM is from this really cool illustration from the IPM Center's website. We're going to monitor or identify what is the problem, what is the pest. We're going to evaluate the threshold. At what point do we need to take action? We're going to maybe employ some preventative means to prevent that pest problem from escalating, or maybe from, continuing. We can then take some action using those action steps. And then we're going to monitor and see if our action and our prevention means has worked. And then we're going to repeat if necessary. So let's look at applying IPM techniques. So IPM technique number 1, cultural controls. So this is all about growing a healthy garden, or well, I'm going to focus on garden first, and then we're going to talk about the home in a little bit. But this is about growing a healthy garden to manage pests naturally, because what we want to do is actually favor the health of the garden and discourage the pest problems. We do that by building healthy soils, feeding with organic fertilizers, protecting the soil with mulch, planting the right plant in the right place, always rotating annual food crops, watering deeply and less often as plants grow, and providing healthy garden maintenance. So we build healthy soil by adding compost. And since there's a free compost giveaway, it could not get any easier. The reason why we want to add compost to the soil is because it improves the soil structure. If you've got hard packed clay or sandy soil, either way, it's going to be a win-win when we add compost to the soil. It's either going to open up the pores and add for more air and water circulation, allow root systems to grow through with ease, or it's going to bind those sandy particles together and actually hold onto nutrients and water. When we add compost to the soil, it's actually increasing the water retention in the soil. And that might sound counterintuitive with clay, but really what we're able to do is hold on to the water and allow it to infiltrate and evaporate with ease. We're actually increasing the microbiology in the soil. And because of that, we're actually able to reduce the need for pesticides, because there are beneficial bacteria and beneficial fungi, and along with the other microbiology that exists, that actually helps fight pathogens and bad bacteria in the soil. So that's why compost is so amazing. We can work it in at the time of planting, or we can top dress and side dress around the root zones of our plants, or we can make a tea and water it in. We're going to feed with organic fertilizers. Feeding with organic fertilizers are going to be the most sustainable way to feed your plants, because we're actually feeding the soil microbes. So that then can increase the health of the soil. And why that's so important is that the soil microbes are actually having a symbiotic relationship with the root zone of that plant, providing nutrients on an as-need basis. So it's slowly going to release nutrients over a long period of time in a more natural way. When we're feeding with organics, we're going to prevent those growth spurts that high nitrogen synthetic fertilizers often give the plants. When we can reduce those growth spurts, we're actually going to reduce pest problems, because those pests like that tender new growth of plants. And when we're feeding with synthetic fertilizers, it's kind of like a steroid for plants. It's always stimulating a lot of new growth, and pests are attracted to that new growth. So we won't see that when we're feeding with organics. And then also understand that organic fertilizers won't run off into our local waterways. I'll also say, as a side note, everything I'm talking about is also going to be a water-wise approach to gardening. We're going to reduce our water usage when we're applying all these practices. We're going to protect the soil and those root zones with mulch. Understand that soil, when it is dry, it's hydrophobic. And what that means is we've just got some rains, but imagine just about a month ago, when we're high heat, peak, excessive heat, sun baking down. And if we did not have mulch on top of the soil, and you might have this experience in your own garden, or if you sometimes you go to a shopping center and they have those planting strips and there's no mulch, that soil, it's almost like it's a crust. It's almost like concrete. And to actually you wouldn't be able to even get a shovel in it. You'd almost have to get like a pickaxe. Well, when it rains and water falls on top of that soil, it is actually going to run off because it's almost like concrete, like I said, and it won't be able to infiltrate. So when we add that layer of mulch, and when I'm talking about mulch, I'm talking about a nice 2 to 3 inch layer of like chunky wood chips or similar, that's going to prevent that soil from creating that crust. And when we have rains, it's going to be able to infiltrate with ease. And then also understand, when we've got that mulch, it's going to reduce that water evaporation rate significantly, which means we're reducing the frequency of watering by at least 20% and upwards to 70%. So that's huge. And then also, especially now, since we're getting into some cooler temperatures, that mulch is going to actually act as a blanket, regulate the soil temperatures, insulate the heat in the winter, but then keep the soil cooler throughout the summer months. So that's pretty cool. But we always want to make sure we're keeping that mulch away from the crown, away from the stems. We're always going to plant the right plant in the right place. So what we want to do is we're going to do our homework. We are going to do a little homework and see what are the conditions of my garden. And we always want to match plants to the condition of the gardens. We're always going to choose, or well, I'd like to say, we're going to favor California and Mediterranean native plants because they can adapt to our summer dry climate. And we can then adapt those to what are the microclimates of my garden? What is exactly the perfect match plant to my garden so that it can grow with ease. And when plants grow with ease, they're going to be less stressed and then less susceptible to pest problems. We're going to choose pest and disease resistant varieties when possible. We're going to group plants with similar growing needs, once established, together. And if we have a plant that we're adding to a section of the garden that's already established, we want to make sure it's going to grow into the space that's available. It's very important to we take these tags give us a lot of information. We want to read what's the maximum size that plant's going to grow, and we want to make sure that we've given that plant that much space. The reason why is because we want to avoid trimming. We want to avoid excessive trimming, because excessive trimming stresses out the plant over time, and it also is going to stimulate a lot of new growth. And remember, new growth attracts pest problems, but a stressed plant is also going to attract pest problems. And then we're going to favor that plant and water that specific plant until it becomes established. We're going to continue watering the rest of that planting bed, keeping the irrigation system set for what that existing planting bed needs. And we're just going to supplement the new plant with water until it becomes established. We're going to practice basic crop rotation. So this applies to our annual food crops. This is going to be really important to reduce pest problems. We're going to, it's ideal not to plant those tomatoes in the same place every year, or that summer squash in the same place every year, because there's problems that could occur. I had this situation on my green beans. I planted some green beans in this new plot. And as I was pulling them out, they were kind of growing funny. I did notice something was odd with them. But as I was pulling them out, because they weren't, producing as I wanted, and they looked a little funny, I noticed there was, they had root aphids. I'd only heard about this. I never witnessed it for myself. So I took some action and I managed that pest problem. However, I really want to make sure I'm not going to plant any legumes in that same bed for 2 years, because if I were to plant some string beans again next year, if there's any root aphids that are still hibernating, overwintering, waiting for the next crop, then the pest problem will blossom again. So that's just an example. It's just nice to rotate your crops. And then we want to practice companion planting when possible. And the science behind companion planting is one, planting plants that will not compete for nutrients, but actually can grow in the same bed with ease, and sharing the nutrients that are in that planting zone without competing. So that's going to be it in a nutshell. But also companion planting is going to also have some techniques where some plants will repel certain pests, some plants will attract certain beneficial insects. And then also when we can interplant certain crops with other flowers or other different types of vegetables, then pests sometimes don't recognize that there is an abundance of a certain crop, such as cabbages. So if we can plant cabbages with other plants, that cabbage moth will not recognize that there is an abundance of cabbage, because it is used to going to a whole line of one type of crop, such as cabbage, and then it's going to make it more attractive because it knows there's tons of food for its young to eat. So we are not growing food for high production, and so we can actually play and make the beds look however we want. And then when we plant, it's really important to plant correctly. We don't want to plant too deeply. We don't want to plant too high. And that's the crown. That's the root zone. When we pull that plant out of the pot, we want to plant it so that the top of the roots at that soil around the stem is just very level with the soil, or just ever so slightly up, because we're going to put a little mulch. And then we're going to water. We're going to water deeply, and we're going to encourage roots to grow out and down. If we water shallowly, that means we're going to have to water more frequently. And if we have a spell of excessive heat, then that plant is going to dehydrate very quickly, and it's going to become stressed, and over time it will not thrive. So the big rule of thumb here is when we're adding new plants to the garden, we want to grow nice deep root systems. We're going to always water at the outer edge of the canopy, and we are going to encourage roots to grow out and down. And we do that with water. And how do we know? We're always going to check the soil. We're going to see how far did that water get. We're going to dig in with a trowel or shovel or fingers, make sure that water got down deep enough. And then we're going to not water again until that soil has dried out. Top few inches is dry. We're going to feel, once that soil is dry, we're going to water again. And then we're going to provide healthy garden maintenance around the garden. We're going to harvest food crops. Any apples that are still on those trees, we want to get them off. Any tomatoes or summer squash that are still in the garden, we want to kind of manage them. By now, they're kind of mushy because we've had some cold nights and we're getting lower daylight hours. And the reason why we want to clean up the garden, any food crops, is because it attracts pests like yellow jackets. Well, that's more in the summertime, but rats, raccoons, other critters are going to come looking for food, and we want to avoid that. And then any fungal spores, any black spot or rust that are on your roses, we want to defoliate. We want to remove those leaves, get them off site. Anything that might have a disease, if it's a limb, a little piece of a branch, or if it's a broken branch, or if it's any leaves that have diseases, let's just remove those now, get them in the green waste bin so they can go off site. We don't want to keep them in our home compost or keep them on site because those spores are going to move and blow in the wind, or stay and bloom again in the spring when the temperatures are right. We're going to selectively prune. We're always going to be very mindful that there's no bird nest or butterfly, chrysalis, things like that. We want to be really mindful as we kind of do some before winter cleanup. And then while we're cleaning up, it's always a great time to monitor for problems. But here's the thing, we want to find this nice balance between what's really clean and what is appropriate, or what is favorably clean for the ecology of the garden. So you might hear some campaigns right now, leave the leaves. Well, guess what? When leaves are dropping off a deciduous tree, that's Mother Nature's mulch. That's the mulch that that tree needs or that plant needs. Now, sometimes we do have to rake up some of the leaves, but if we can find that nice balance, because when we can leave leaves, or when we can leave some stems on our perennials or shrubs where they just looks like they're just stems sticking up, what happens is 30% of our native bees are actually going to tunnel. They will tunnel into stems, use those stems as a place to lay their eggs. And leaves are a great place that insects will hibernate over winter. And then birds, you'll see a lot of times birds scratching around because they're looking for those bugs to eat. So it's a nice way to find that balance. And then if there's a way that we don't deadhead everything. Okay. We want to actually leave some, we want to leave the berries. We want to leave some of the seeds on the plants, like in the asters, or the fluff of the Japanese anemones, because that's what the birds can utilize that for nesting material. Berries are going to offer a lot of high nutrients, high value foods to songbirds and other, critters that are in our garden, as well as, the acorns are going to feed a plethora of wildlife that might visit the garden if we have a live oak on our property, and so forth. So these are some things we can look at as being a benefit to the garden. All right, now we're going to look at some mechanical controls. So mechanical controls really are ideal for preventing pests from coming into the home, but we also have preventative mechanical controls to prevent a lot of pests in the garden. So you can see here the 1/4-inch hardware cloth. This is actually just that galvanized wire fencing. It is called hardware cloth, so not a term that's very familiar for many, but it's an excellent way to prevent rodents from coming into the house through a vent. Door sweeps are an incredible tool to prevent crawling insects from coming in. In fact, it's the #1 tool to prevent cockroaches from coming in to a home, which I thought was interesting. A fresh bead of caulk to seal up any cracks and crevices around windows or doors or anything, floorboards, things like that, is going to prevent critters from coming in. Of course, row cover, weather stripping will keep the critters, the insects out and the heat in. We're going to look at weeding tools, and then the sheet metal corners to prevent rodents. But I'll show you all that in a moment. We're going to look at barriers. What kind of barriers can we utilize around our garden and our home to prevent pests from accessing either our food, our flowers, or getting into our home? So outside in the garden, we're going to look at row cover, or bird netting, or deer fencing, gopher baskets. We're going to look at copper tape barriers that we would put around a sleeve to prevent slugs and snails from crossing. We can use scare tape, which is actually a deterrent. It's not really a barrier, but it is an excellent way to prevent birds from getting the fruit in our fruit trees or the berries and so forth. So we're always going to look at how we can prevent the pests, and barriers are a great category. We're going to look at exclusion frames or fencing or baskets. These are more barriers. So when we want to try to manage, well, when we're looking to manage a pest, we want to identify what's the pest and what would be the best tool for the job. So if it's rats and mice, we're going to look at that 1/4-inch hardware cloth. If it's gophers, we're going to line those raised beds with 1/2-inch hardware cloth, or make baskets, or purchase the baskets to plant our plants in to prevent them from eating the roots. Squirrels, we're going to look at 3/4-inch fencing, poultry wire, or similar. We can lay that wire on top of the soil to prevent the squirrels from digging. We can cover our plants with it, making frames and so forth. And then deers, we're going to always have our fencing that's 7 feet tall as a minimum, because anything shorter they can jump over. Sheet mulching is another barrier. This is an excellent way to transition that lawn to a native garden. It is an excellent way to smother large areas of weeds. If there's an area of your garden that's just overwhelming and you don't really have the resources to always mow it, or manage it, lay down multiple layers of cardboard with that nice 3 inches of mulch on top. It's also, as the cardboard starts to decompose, it regenerates the soil in unused areas. It just makes that soil gold. It's really going to be amazing. It is an excellent way to defend against weeds, because weed seeds are less likely able to germinate in the area, and it feeds the soil over time. And then other barriers. Now, this is not really the time of year, but just think about the summer, this next summer as it approaches. You want to take advantage of shade cloths. And if we're planting young fruit trees, bare root season is right around the corner. Great opportunity to add more fruit trees to your garden. We're going to want to protect the trunks of those fruit trees with some agricultural paint, because the canopies have not grown enough. And when we get sun, it can actually burn the trunk. We're going to work with traps, and traps can look like a lot of different things. They can actually be rodent traps or gopher traps, fly traps, yellow jacket traps. There's sticky traps that can hold on to the pests. And then there's things like snail and slug boards, which actually work as a trap. They'll go under there during the heat of the day, because it's nice and cool and moist, and you can lift up that board and just scrape those slugs and snails right off. It's totally gross, but very effective. And then another thing I like to share about sticky traps, especially inside the house, is that sticky traps are really helpful. They help us identify where the pest problem is located, so that we can then focus our action in that area. So these are nice tools to help us identify where to focus our action. Another IPM technique is biological controls. This is when we're going to invite living organisms in the form of beneficial insects, pollinators, birds, and other garden allies to manage the pests for us. So this is one of my favorite categories, and this is what I actually focus on very much throughout the garden, is how can I attract more beneficial insects, more birds, more pollinators, and so forth, so that they can eat, or so that the beneficial insects can eat or parasitize the pests, and that we can have pollinators that can pollinate my flowers, so that I can have higher yields and larger food crops, and I can just keep that balance going along. Remember that some pests are seasonal and expected. So for instance, aphids, we know we're always going to see them in the spring when the temperatures are nice and they're starting to warm and before things get too hot. But pests are food for beneficial insects and for birds, which help keep the garden happy and healthy in a nice balance. So when we have pest problems, I just like to share that it might be a nice opportunity to reevaluate our threshold of tolerance. How much damage can we take, and how much damage can the plant take before we really need to take action? And oftentimes, beneficial insects and the birds, they've got it covered. We don't really have to interfere. But I'll also share that an infestation of a pest can be a clue that something is not working, or that a plant is stressed, or that something's out of balance. So that's what I actually invite. I like to see that there is the pests are actually telling us there's something else going on, and we want to find out the why. We want to grow biodiversity. We want to choose plants that attract beneficial insects and pollinators. We want to grow the largest variety of flowers, and we want to include flowers that look like a daisy or a sunflower, because like the aster in my background, we might see one flower here, but those petals are raised, and that orange cone in the middle, those are actually hundreds of flowers. And a lot of our beneficial insects are micros. They're just tinies, and we don't even recognize them with the naked eye, as well as pollinators. We have a lot of micropollinators out there, and they really like tiny flowers. So we're going to look at things like erigeron, asters, cosmos, so forth. And then we want to also include flowers that grow in clusters of tiny flowers like yarrow or sweet alyssum or ceanothus, things like that. All I can share is all you have to do is plant and they will come. And then the fourth of our action steps is chemical controls. And something I'd like to share is that pesticides do not solve the pest problem. They really just kill the pest. So when we use pesticides, we always want to use them as a last resort. We always want to choose eco-friendly, less toxic products. We always want to apply those pesticides according to the label. I'll share that if the pest is not on the label, that product's not going to work for that pest problem. We always want to wear PPE, and we want to understand the risks of using that product. So let's look at eco-friendly pesticides. There are so many on the market nowadays. I started working as a IPM pest educator about 10 years ago, but I've worked in the retail garden industry for about 20 years now. And I will share that there are oftentimes more eco-friendly products than there are synthetic chemical products. So it's kind of cool. We are looking at insecticidal soaps, botanical pesticides. Those are pesticides that are derived from plants, like the pyrethrin, biopesticides, which are living organisms like beneficial bacteria that can kill pest problems. We have copper soap fungicides, neem, oils, so many eco-friendlies. But I want to talk a little bit about how we choose the pesticides. We want to understand kind of the action of the pest, and that helps us identify how we would use or what pesticides we would choose. So insects with sucking mouth parts, that would be like aphids. Aphids have like a little straw that they will pierce the leaf with and suck all those juices out. Rasping mouth parts are going to be something like a spider mite or thrips, where they're actually rasping and actually sucking the juices out that way. And when we have insects like that have sucking and rasping mouth parts, we can work with just wiping off those pests. We can syringe them off with a little spray bottle of water. We can invite beneficial insects by planting more flowering plants that attract them. We'd want to avoid synthetic fertilizers because, as I mentioned before, those synthetic fertilizers spike a lot of new growth. We want to increase the circulation. So we're going to do that mindful pruning where we're just going to open up the plant a little bit to get more air circulation moving through. We're going to water properly, irrigate properly. Oftentimes when we're watering frequently and shallowly, that plant's stressed, we're going to see more pest problems. Or if that plant is always wet and it doesn't want to always be wet, or maybe sometimes a container, it's not draining. We want to make sure the drainage holes are flowing and all of that. So look at your irrigation. And then if we need to go with the pesticide, we can easily work with insecticidal soaps using those in accordance to the label, and oils like neem or horticulture oil. Chewing insects. These are beetles, caterpillars, anything that might be chewing the plant. It could be snails, slugs, things like that. We can remove them by hand. We can work with barriers and traps. That's a really great way to manage them. Understand that with chewing insects, sometimes, depending on what the plant, the pest is, if there's a larvae form, a lot of times the larvae form will be in the soil during some part of the life cycle. and we can inoculate those soils with beneficial nematodes, which I'll show a little bit more in a bit. And they can actually feed on the larvae and break the life cycle. We could also work with products like BT, the Bacillus thuringiensis. It's actually for insects with chewing mouth parts to ingest, like caterpillars. Caterpillars, not all of them are friends, some of them are foes. They ingest it. It's an excellent way to manage. Spinosad is another biopesticide. It is going to also be for insects with chewing mouth parts. It also will cross over to rasping mouth parts. I know this might be a little technical, but just bear with me. And then iron phosphate is going to be something that needs to be ingested, which is excellent for slugs and snails. And then crawling insects. Crawling insects, very easy. We can always remove them by hand. We can work with barriers, with traps, and we can work with products like diatomaceous earth, because when they crawl over it, it gets on their exoskeleton and it dehydrates them. So we always want to know how the pesticide is intended to work, and we always want to read the label. So these are 3 common pesticides that, I should say common eco-friendly pesticides, that I just want to review because I get this question a lot. And this is where things start to get a little bit confusing, because there's actually some science involved, and that's not really always a fun thing for people to take the time to learn about. But insecticidal soap, this is potassium salts of fatty acids. It's very eco-friendly. It's one of the least toxic products that you can buy. It's a contact spray, so it means it has to contact the insect to kill it. It's very narrow spectrum. That means it's only going to kill a very short list of pests. And in this case, it's going to be soft-bodied insects such as aphids and mealybugs, whitefly nymphs, and so forth. And then it is not dish detergent. Okay. Neem. Clarified hydrophobic extract of neem oil. Neem, actually, the oil comes from the neem tree. They extract it from the azadirachtin, another product. And this is what we buy. When we go to the store and buy neem, it's typically the clarified hydrophobic extract of the neem oil. It is also a contact kill. We want to make contact with that insect. It is going to have some other properties to it, such as an anti-feeding and growth inhibitor, but primarily contact kill, similar to like a horticultural oil, but it's going to be more broad spectrum. And it's actually going to work as an insecticide, a fungicide, and a miticide. So it's going to kill insects, fungal diseases, and mites. And then spinosad. Spinosad is, you might recognize it under the name of Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew, or Garden Insect. Monterey Lawn and Garden has a complete insect control, garden insect control. I think that's what it is. I apologize, I kind of forgot. But it's a bacterium which is just, it needs to be ingested, and it disrupts the insect's neurotransmission. So this is very effective. It's kind of cool the way it works. It's very broad spectrum. It will kill insects that have those chewing or rasping mouth parts. So excellent for thrips, spider mites, leaf miner. Okay, these are some common pests that we would use this for. But on the label, because we always read the label, it says it's limited to only using it 6 times a year. So guess what? We have to make sure we're limiting to 6 times a year so we don't build up pesticide resistance. There's a lot of ways to buy and apply pesticides. We're going to see them in a ready-to-use trigger spray, a hose and ready to spray where we attach it to the hose and we spray down the area. Concentrate that we'd have to mix into a sprayer, either like a hand sprayer or like a little quart pump sprayer. Powders that can either be mixed with water to be like a wettable powder that we could spray on, or the powder, depending on the product, could just get dusted. And then products like little beads like this, the Sluggo is like a little bait that needs to be ingested. So we sprinkle that out, and then the slugs and snails would need to ingest it. And then we want to always read the label. And this is one of the hardest things that I don't think they want you to really understand. I mean, the font is always the tiniest, and there's a lot of really numbers and, unfamiliar words and so forth. But we want to understand what the active ingredients are. Okay. And if these are words that you are not familiar with, feel free to look it up. Okay. I encourage you to look it up. All right. Because this is what's really important. We're always going to see a signal word. It's either going to be caution, which is slightly toxic, a warning, which means moderately toxic, or danger, which is highly toxic or a corrosive product. So caution is going to be on that low end of the spectrum. It's always going to say keep out of reach of children. It's always going to have these hazards because it's a pesticide designed to kill something. So remember that even though these are eco-friendly and they're registered for organic use or OMRI certified, they're all pesticides designed to kill something. So we need to use them with caution. On this label tells us a lot. We want to shake well before using. This is this herbicide is a contact, so it has to make contact, non-select, broad spectrum. So it doesn't discriminate. It's just going to kill whatever it touches. It's a foliar applied, so we're going to spray it onto the grass and weed killer. So that's how this works. If there are some roses in the way and some drift from the breeze moves this pesticide and makes contact with those rose leaves are going to also die. Over here, it's going to say, it kills many types of weeds and grasses. It is an alternate solution to synthetic grass and weed killers. So they're saying that this is a nice organic alternative. It does not translocate, means it's not going to move through the soil to merge or interact with other root zones. Okay. It is rainproof once dry, and it is people and pets safe when used as directed as soon as it's dried on the plant. All right, over here, this is the list of, and of course, this is just a small list. We always want to find, so let's say I need to manage some clover. I want to make sure clover is on the label. Once I see that it's on the label, bingo, I can use this product for that pest problem. And then, of course, as I shared, there's always these precautionary statements, hazards to humans and animals. This is because again, it is registered as a pesticide, and we want to make sure we're using it as instructed. If we're using it in accordance to the label, then this is going to be a safer product to use, but we want to make sure we're using those cautions. All right. We always want to wear PPE. Now, we don't have to suit up in this type of like a Tyvek suit or anything like that. However, it is important that we're wearing long pants, long sleeves, non-cotton gloves. We're wearing boots. We're not out there in shorts and flip-flops, okay? Because even neem oil can cause a dermal reaction. So let's just make sure we're protecting ourselves, that we're not going to breathe in these products, because some of these products can be lung and eye irritants. And then tips for using pesticides: we want to understand that mode of action. We want to learn, or I should say, understand that less toxic products could take longer to work. So in the case of neem, it could take up to 4 days for the insects to die. So we want to be patient. We just want to know that the products are, when we have to go for these products, that they're working. Timing is important. We want to know that pest life cycle and apply the pesticide at the best time of that life cycle. Remember, I said sometimes it's best to manage that pest when it's in its larvae stage. So let's wait and manage it in its larvae stage. We're going to spot, treat an area and only target that pest. We are going to apply pesticides at the end of the day at dusk, because most of our beneficial insects are already in their hives, in their dens, and not active. And that includes our bees, our other pollinators. And if we're releasing beneficial insects, we want to give them time to find the pests before we apply the pesticides. And again, We want to understand the unintended consequences of our actions. No pesticide is risk-free. Unintended consequences of pesticide use, regardless if it's a synthetic or an eco-friendly, and especially if it's a do-it-yourself homemade remedy, we really want to know what's going on and understand those unintended consequences. Drift, as I mentioned, when there's a little breeze and the pesticide is moving in that breeze, can cause damage to non-targeted plants. Contamination of the soil or groundwater when improperly applied or overused is a problem. Damage to the soil microbes if we're not applying it properly or if we're using products that are more toxic. And remember, more is not better. All right, I want to just briefly talk a little bit about the do-it-your-home homemade remedies because I hear about this a lot. And I think you all have too. So we've all seen those recipes on the interwebs about make your own pesticide, which is essentially some combination of dish soap, which oftentimes it's some name brands that are suggested, but those name brands are not dish soaps, they're detergents. The only true soap on the market is Castile soap. The name brands are going to be Dr. Bronner's, Whole Foods 365 brand. They have a Castile soap. Trader Joe's might, and I'm sure there's some other Castile soap brands out there, but Castile soap is the only true soap. Okay, so if you're not using that, then it is not a true soap and you're using a detergent. Dish detergents have a lot of toxic additives. So in this case can cause, look at the ingredients on the bottle of your dish detergent and just give a couple of those a little web search and see what they're doing, because one of the top brands, these are just a couple of the ingredients. They cause acute aquatic toxicity, are likely a human carcinogen and a groundwater contaminant. This is ironic because you would think your dish detergent would not cause aquatic toxicity or be a groundwater contaminant. Salt. Salt is very detrimental to the soil organisms. We want to avoid using salt in the garden. That's why we want to avoid, one reason why we want to avoid using synthetic fertilizers, because they typically are really high in salts. And that can be a problem. But then vinegar. So vinegar really needs to be used with extreme caution. Our household vinegar that we use as salad dressing or recipes is just 5% acetic acid. That's not going to be strong enough to kill weeds. But 11% acetic acid, again, not quite strong enough to kill weeds, but now we're at the level that it can burn your skin and cause some eye damage. And then horticulture vinegar, which is strong enough to kill weeds, which is 20 to 30% acetic acid, is strong enough to cause blindness if we get it in our eyes, and is corrosive to metals. So we just really want to use some caution. And then when we have products that we no longer want, we want to take them to our local household hazardous waste. We want to get them off site. We want to clean out those garages. We want to clean out those garden sheds and take the products to our local household hazardous waste. So now I'm going to pause for 3 minutes. I'm going to let you guys stretch. I'm going to answer any questions that might be available, and then we're going to continue with the next part of our program, which is another about, I'm going to say 25, 30 minutes. So that's why we're just going to take 3 minutes. Happy to answer any questions, and we will be back in just about 3 minutes. So it's going to be short and sweet.
I figured I'd pop on here and read 2 of the questions that came in through our Q&A. So you mentioned compost tea much earlier in the presentation, and the question is, how do you make a compost tea?
Ooh, that is a great question. I'm going to say it's a little complicated, but for a few of my friends that do make it, they say it's easy, but you just need some equipment. So you do need to get some good quality compost, and you're going to get some water that is chlorine and chloramine free. So that could be challenging for some. And then we need something that's like going to aerate that water. because when we mix the two, and as the tea is brewing, so to speak, it needs to have some aeration. So sometimes like a pump for an aquarium, if you have that, then that's the secret. And then after that tea is brewed, you can water it around the garden. You can water it on top of the plant, so it's the plants are absorbing those nutrients through their pores or their cells of their leaf tissue, or you can water it around those root zones. I'm sure there is a little bit more to it, like how long the tea is brewing for. And, I am going to leave those details to the amazing business Linkso. Linkso in San Carlos can most likely answer all of those questions. And I know that they also brew compost tea, or at least they were before the pandemic. So they might be brewing again, and they are an amazing resource.
Great. And then we had one more question asking about how, where, and who can tell me about water efficient play yard area or lawn that would be for kids and dogs. So what to plant.
Yeah. Well, I want to share that the Bay Area Gardening.org slide, that was the last slide in the intro. That is one of my favorite resources. I will use that regularly. And that's going to have a beautiful list of water-wise lawn alternatives that are going to be play, children and pet friendly. You can also go to CalScapes, which is California Native Plant Society's resource database to get that information. And my other resource at the top of my head, and Izzy, did we do this? Did I talk about this on the program that we did like a month ago? Was it like Cal Water? One of the water agencies has a really nice list of like lawn, like alternatives, but any of the agencies that are offering the rebate for the lawn conversion is going to have a nice list of plants that would be appropriate for that as well. So that's a great question.
All right. And that's all our questions for now.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that was a really nice, fast 3 minutes. And we are going to continue to apply IPM techniques for many of the common seasonal pests. So yeah, let's talk about that. So what is the very, very, very first step with pest management? It's going to be identification. So identification is number one. If we can't identify that pest, it's going to be really hard to solve that pest problem. We want to understand the life cycle of that pest. We're going to understand that pest's habitat and the timing of our action, or understand what is the timing of the life cycle of that pest. So I always like to give the great example of spittlebugs that we see every April. We see this little insect that lays its eggs in a little foamy mass. It looks like someone spit on your plants. That the life cycle of that pest, well, it's not even a pest. It really doesn't do any damage. It's just kind of a nuisance. It's an eyesore because it looks like someone spit on your plants. But what I like to share is it's going to be gone in 2 weeks. And if it's really bothering you that much, just blast it off with a little water. But remember, we're trying to save water, so don't blast it off with too much. But then also, we're going to look around and take a closer look and see, are there any beneficial insects around? Are there any natural enemies? Because if they are, we don't really need to worry about it. So I want to walk through a couple of fun things. So is this a pest or a pal? You have your rows, and you see some aphids on there, but then you see this. It's a syrphid fly larva. So syrphid fly larva is actually going to be your pal. It's a friend. It's that little hoverfly or syrphid fly, the flower fly, that little fly. It looks like a wasp or a bee, but it's actually a fly, and it kind of darts around the garden. And they come in a lot of different sizes, either from 1/8 of an inch up to 1/2 inch. They absolutely love sweet alyssum. It's their number one. And I'm always planting sweet alyssum around my roses to attract them, because when I have aphids on my roses, they're going to lay their eggs, and their larvae looks like a little caterpillar with a racing stripe down its back, loves to feed on aphids. So I've created this scenario because I want to have this recipe for success. And I want to be really careful when I'm going out and inspecting that I don't accidentally squish them or use a pesticide to kill him. And then there's a lot of lookalikes in the garden. This is a mealybug destroyer. This is actually in the same family as the ladybug or ladybird beetle, and it feeds on mealybugs. This is its most favorite thing to feed on. But then it looks really similar to a flea beetle. That is actually a pest that feeds on foliage of seedlings and leafy greens. So good bug, bad bug. And then this is my first example I want to share. Is you see this on your leaves of the fruit trees in the spring. What do? Well, that's aphids. Puckering is from aphid damage, and it's also on a plum. This is peach leaf curl, which is a fungal disease. Peach leaf curl only affects nectarines and peaches. It does not affect plums. So when we can identify the plant, we typically can identify the pest, but two very different pest problems. So one, we would need an insecticide like insecticidal soap to manage the aphids. Other, we would need a fungicide to manage the peach leaf curl. This is another example of these little weird bumps and nodes all over this plum tree. This is a ladybug pupa, and this is soft scale. So the soft scale is actually an insect that always looks kind of weird. So you can almost imagine it like an abalone. In this case, they're kind of bulbous, but if you don't really know what's going on, you would think that the ladybug pupa, you're not really recognize it as a ladybug pupa, but the ladybugs are there to eat the soft scale. So now we're going to look at the IPM approach. I'm going to just walk you through how we kind of manage these kind of pest problems to help give you a better idea of how, just help you out. So ants, outside, ants are decomposers. They aerate the soil. They eat other insect pests, right? But they also will farm the sweet honeydew secretion that many pests like aphids or those scale insects create. So they're actually going to be farming it and protecting those pests to kind of prevent beneficial insects from coming and managing them. So outdoors, we're going to manage. So, okay, this is the perfect example. When I see ants trailing up my plum tree or my butylon, it is telling me that there is another problem going on. And I'm going to take a closer look, and I'm going to see that there's scale or there's aphids or something. So I am going to first line of action is I want to manage that scale, those aphids or whatever that pest is. And then I can make a barrier, because the tool, a barrier with insect glue or tanglefoot, which is an insect glue. And we're always going to put that on some type of a banding material. Like we're going to get some paper or packing tape, sticky side out, and then put that barrier glue on it so that we can always remove it later without damaging the trunk. And then if we need to use a pesticide, the eco-friendly pesticides that we can use are bait stations with spinosad or the boric acid. Boric acid is also sodium tetraboric decahydrate. That's such a hard word for me to say, but essentially borax. And then indoors, we're going to see those scouts coming in. I've already seen some this year. I'm sure you have too. We're going to kill those scouts and then just wipe off the scent trails with just a little bit of cleaner or soapy sponge. And then we're going to, clean up and store food, and we're going to look and see if there's any leaks, water leaks. A lot of times what we see is like ants and cockroaches and other critters come in looking for water, and it's an indicator that we have a water leak. And boy, let me tell you, I'm really happy to learn about that. We're going to seal up those cracks and crevices with a fresh bead of caulk or similar. So that's our tool. We're going to put new weather stripping on the doors and windows. That's another tool. And then if we need to, So the first two are the cultural controls, okay? And the second two are the mechanical controls. And if we need to use a pesticide, it's going to be very similar. We're going to use bait stations, okay, with boric acid or hydromethylene or Avermec B. Now, something to share about bait stations is that they're the most effective way to manage ants and cockroaches. We're talking about ants. They take the bait back to the colony, feed everybody, everybody dies. It could take a few days before we see the activity disappear. And especially if we're using something like the Terra liquid ant bait, which is boric acid and a sugar bait, those ants are going to swarm it. It's alarming, but after a few days, it stops because the bait has done its job. Puppies and children like to chew on little plastic things. So we always want to make sure that those are, not, we want to only target the pests. We don't want any unintended consequences. So make sure that those are protected. And when we're using a spray, there's some amazing, very good eco-friendly sprays on the market, such as the Orange Guard or Zevo products. These are contact kills. So they're only killing what's on contact. So we're going to have to reapply as more ants come in. And then I just want to talk briefly about the difference between boric acid and diatomaceous earth, because these are both excellent tools, excellent pesticides for using for indoor pest management. Boric acid is going to be in about the size, the powder, not the liquid, because we were just talking about the Terra liquid ant bait. That's the boric acid as the active. That's in the liquid form. These are going to be in the powder form, which is about the size of a grain of salt. Okay. And we can do a dusting of boric acid in the frame of a wall if we have to go in for plumbing or electrical, as long as it stays dry, or like behind cabinets. As long as it stays dry, it's going to be an effective pesticide that manages cockroaches and ants for a very long time. It is something, cockroaches and ants are grooming insects. So what happens is they walk over it, they're grooming themselves, they ingest it. And the boric acid disrupts the gut bacteria that prevents digestion, which leads to starvation. Diatomaceous earth is a very, very fine chalk-like powder that is going to act as a desiccant. It's going to get on the exoskeleton of the crawling insects and dehydrate them. Boric acid, I'm sorry, the diatomaceous earth is not toxic. However, it is a lung and eye irritant. So we absolutely do not want to breathe it. We don't want to get in our eyes. So I will puff it into cracks and crevices, and then before sealing it up with the, that fresh bead of caulk. But while I'm waiting for the pest problem to get managed, I want to make sure that my puppy can't like sniff up that diatomaceous earth, inhale it, or that children can't access it, because again, we don't want them to get irritated. Aphids. Aphids thrive and really do well when we're feeding our plants with synthetic fertilizers. They also do really well when we're excessively pruning our plants a lot. Okay, remember, because both of those will stimulate a lot of new growth. Ants protect aphids and farm their honeydew secretions. Okay, so they're doing really well. Aphids are going to do really well when there's a lot of ants around, protecting them. And aphids will thrive when there's lack of beneficial predators. Aphids will be reduced when we're feeding with organic fertilizers, practicing selective mindful pruning, inviting beneficial insects to the area, syringing with a spray bottle of water, wiping them off, or using eco-friendly products such as soaps and oils. Roly-polies and earwigs, or earwigs and sow bugs, roly-polies, pill bugs. Okay, this one's kind of challenging because remember I said identification is key. So the damage is going to all look very similar. So who do we know is the culprit? Well, we're going to see who's out there. Oftentimes when we are watering at night, evening moisture attracts roly-polies, earwigs, slugs, and snails. So we want to water right around the sunrise hours. It's the best time to water. And using traps is going to help us identify who it is. Now that picture on the lower left, I apologize. That's actually a deli container. That's the lid of the deli container. You don't see the side view because it's actually buried in the ground. The deli container is at soil level, and I put some holes in it. It looks very cryptic and weird, but what's in that deli container is about an inch of water, a couple drops of fish oil or oil from sardines or anchovies or tuna. And I'm gonna tell you, the earwigs love it. So they just dive right in and then they can't get out. That's gonna tell me who the culprit is. Or we could do a little beer trap and we're going to get the roly-polies, and that's that culprit. So oftentimes it's all of the above. It's going to be earwigs, roly-polies, and slugs and snails. But the other thing we can do to prevent the earwigs and the roly-polies is creating barriers with diatomaceous earth. So we make a nice band around the plants, and when they cross it, they will get dehydrated. Their exoskeletons will dehydrate them. It's a desiccant. And then there's baits that contain iron phosphate. Iron phosphate is just a little mineral. It's blended with spinosad. And now this does not have that 6 times a year limit, but it makes it now more broad spectrum. And so not only is it going to be excellent for managing slugs and snails, but it expands to earwigs, cutworms, sow bugs, pill bugs, and so forth. So these are really great products if we need to use a pesticide. Rats and mice. Okay, so rats and mice come into the house. It's very this is the time of year that we see a lot of activity because it's cold out there. They're coming in to make nests. So we want to look at replacing the weather stripping around the doors of our house and the garages. We want to check those foundation vents, and we want to cover the foundation vents with that 1/4 inch hardware cloth, because this is a pencil. Okay, we're all familiar with what a pencil is. This is 3/8 of an inch. And a mouse or a young rat can fit through a hole this small. Okay, so that's why we work with 1/4 inch hardware cloth. We're going to check the fireplace vents, the stove vents, the laundry dryer vents, foundation vents, whatever vents that we can find. And we're going to cover them with that 1/4 inch hardware cloth, or just highly consider that that could be an access point for those rodents to come in. We're going to use sheet metal roof flashing or hardware cloth with expanding foam or similar to seal any points of entry. Okay, because remember, rats and mice coming in the home is undesirable. It's not something I want, but they're not really the problem. The problem is that there's an access point. There's a point of entry. There's a way for them to come in, and we have to solve that problem before we can prevent the rodents coming in. Caulking under the seat and sinks and patching the holes in the walls with wall repair patch kits will help prevent this. Placing pet food in metal containers that close tight to prevent the rodents from getting into the pet food. And in storage areas, store items in plastic bins rather than cardboard boxes, because mice love to nest in those cardboard boxes. Rats will not chew through hardware cloth or sheet metal roof flashing. So steel wool is going to be a temporary fix. Rats will chew through it, mice won't, but understand, so we can use it if we've got mice that we just want to prevent coming in, but steel wool will over 2 years will rust, and by year 3 it will disintegrate. And this is just an example of some tools that I use. So that top left corner is the garage. There's a big gap. They can walk right in. But the bottom right corner, I have this from the gutters. It's just a support to hold the gutters up. I call it a corner. I just put it on the outside of the garage door, and now it prevents the rodents from coming in, and it excludes them. And then of course it's the hardware cloth behind the vent. Rats in the garden, we're going to remove places of harborage, those wood piles, those ivy landscapes, anything where there's like dense greenery that they can live in. We're going to make sure the compost Our compost and our chicken coops are contained. They're really set up like Fort Knox so the rodents can't get in. We want to keep the lids on the garbage cans and sealed really well. We want to remove pet food availability when we're feeding pets all day. We're actually also feeding the rodents. We want to rethink bird feeders because those rodents also really like the bird feed that falls on the ground. And we want to prevent rodent access with barriers and exclusion frames. So this is a really cool frame that I saw. And I think it first time I saw it was on Sunset Western Magazine, but it comes from Homestead Design Collective. And then I don't know about you, but gopher activity and mole activity really ramps up in the fall. And I have been, managing gophers like crazy right now. But here's the deal. Proper identification is key. They're both very different. Gophers are herbivores. They tunnel a little deeper. Their tunnels are about 6 to 12 inches below the surface of the soil. They have extensive burrowing systems. And their mounds are crescent shaped because they actually fling the soil out as they come out. Moles, they eat bugs. They eat earthworms, they eat white grubs, beetles, and other soil dwelling larvae. So I see them as beneficial, but I do understand how they can kind of wreck a turf area. Their tunnels are very shallow. They're about 4 to 8 inches. You can actually see the tunnels. If you've got a big turf area or a lawn, a garden area where there's mole activity, you can actually see their tunnels. And they also have extensive, elaborate burrow systems. Here are the pictures. Gopher, like I said, it's crescent shaped, fanned out, and you see the plug. That's their tunnel. They just plugged it. Whereas a mole mound is literally a mound that looks kind of like a volcano from the profile. Gophers, we're going to prevent them. We don't want them eating the roots of our plants. So we're going to plant everything inside a gopher basket or line that raised bed with the 1/2 inch hardware cloth. We don't need to go as small as 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, it's fine. And if we need to work with a repellent, repellents with the active ingredient castor oil are going to be effective. We're going to use them in accordance to the instructions. We're going to reapply a couple of times in accordance to the label. And when there is enough castor oil in the soil, it's actually going to work as a very effective repellent. But remember, repellents are just temporary deterrents. They're not solving the problem. They can buy us some time. Traps are going to be the most efficient and effective way. However, not everyone is brave enough or interested in working with traps. But I will share the traps, 3 traps that are on the left. Those are the pinch style traps. Very effective. The one on the top is the Gophinator. That is, I found to be one of the most effective. Maccabee is another trap I use. Actually, I use all of these traps. They're all really good. You kind of learn after, if you are open to using traps, you kind of learn which traps kind of will work for different situations. The bottom left is the cinch trap. The one in the middle is the gopher hawk. That we will insert in the tunnel. We'll find where the tunnel is and it expands. And as those traps, gophers walk by, it gets cinched. The ones on the right are also black boxes or black tunnels, and they will also cinch that gopher. Moles, we're going to, if we want to remove the moles, we want to remove the food source. We want to remove all those insects that those moles eat. And we do that with beneficial nematodes, which I'll show you in a moment. And then again, the castor oil repellents work very well, but again, they're temporary deterrents. And then there are some traps that you can use for moles, but I find that just removing the food source and using repellents works very well to manage moles. So does this look familiar to anyone? Is anyone seeing their lawn getting rolled up? Well, it's from our friend, the raccoon. So to prevent moles and raccoons from damaging your garden, we want to keep turf areas healthy. When we do that, that means we're not seeing a lot of grubs. We can use exclusion when possible for the raccoon. For the raccoon or even the mole, that would be, sinking in some gopher wire or something around the edges of that lawn. But for on top of the lawn, to prevent the raccoons from rolling up the lawn, we're going to use poultry wire as a barrier, or you can use bird netting. That's fine too, but you have to tack it down. We're going to remove the food source. So we remember, we don't want to feed wildlife, because when we're feeding wildlife or when we're training them, letting them know that there's food out there, we're training them to come and eat the food. But when we can remove that food, we're training them that there is no reward, there are no grubs. So they will learn over time that there's no luck. Beneficial nematodes, we can purchase them at our local garden centers or online. These are microscopic worm-like organisms that feed on soil-dwelling larvae. So there's a couple different species. You always want to read the label, make sure you're getting the right one. This is a really cool picture of beneficial nematodes attacking a fungus gnat larvae. It's kind of cool. Cats and squirrels, we are going to do a similar thing. We're just going to cover those soil areas or planting beds with either poultry wire, or for cats, specific cat scat mats that prevent them from digging. We can also cover areas with bird netting. There are some repellents on the market. Cat scram and critter ritter are, I've heard, are very effective, but again, they're temporary deterrents. But we really want to be mindful that we want to avoid feeding feral cats and wild animals. This contributes to the problem. And then managing weeds, we are going to manage them at the first sign. We are going to use so many weeding tools. There's weeding hose, cultivators, dandelion weeders, hories, trowels, and shovels. We can use sheet mulching techniques. We can mow them when they start to get taller. But whatever you do, you want to manage your weeds at first sight, or when they start to get a little taller, we want to mow them, because they are also competing for water. And then as the leaves fall off the tree, and for those of us that have fruit trees and roses, we are entering the dormant season. So dormant season means we can apply dormant application of certain pesticides, typically copper, fungicide, or horticulture oil. In accordance to the label, it's a stronger mixing rate, and we apply it to plants, fruit trees, and roses once their leaves have dropped. We're applying it at a stronger mixing rate. We're using less pesticide because there's no leaves. And now we're able to actually target any insects or fungal spores that are overwintering on that plant. So it's kind of cool. So we're going to use the oil, horticulture oil, for insects. And we're going to use the copper for diseases. We're going to mix in accordance to the label, and we are going to only apply during the dormant season. Once those buds in the spring have cracked, dormant season for that plant is over. Some online resources I'd like to share is the Our Water, Our World website, which has a catalog of fact sheets that help walk you through less toxic pest management for a lot of the common pests, many of the ones we talked about tonight. And then the UC IPM UC statewide IPM program not only is an amazing database for pest management, but they also have this really cool home and garden pest newsletter. And it's a quarterly newsletter. It's pretty cool. It comes right to your email. And I highly encourage you to sign up for that. For pest identification support, you can go to bugguide.net. And then for information on how those active ingredients work, you can go to the National Pesticide Information Center. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining. I did say it would be about an hour and a half. I'd like to finish with any of your questions. And again, if you have questions that come up later after the program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am Suzanne, plantharmony.org. My website is plantharmony.org, and you can find me on Instagram at plantharmony. That was a lot of information, right? I told you guys that was going to be a lot.
I learned a lot though, so it's okay.
It's hard to keep it short. There's so much. It's very, there's a lot of depth, a lot of layers to integrated pest management.
I can read one of the questions that came in. We have one in the Q&A. There used to be a county or a city department to trap raccoons. Does that still exist?
Oh, okay. So my understanding is that Fish and Wildlife or local any type of local animal control will not come and trap raccoons. It's actually the laws for trapping on site is that you have to release on site. You don't get to relocate. And the other laws, it gets really complicated. If you trap an animal on site, you have to euthanize humanely. And that's where things get to be a little tricky. You aren't able to use firearms within city limits. You're not allowed to drown or suffocate. So when it comes to wildlife management, that UCIPM website has an amazing chapter or whole vein of information on managing wildlife. So I'd encourage you to check it out. But really what it comes down to is making your area undesirable to raccoons, making sure there is no food out, that there is no reason why they would want to come to your garden, that your garbage cans are secured and locked and your animals are inside, and those dog doors are secure because they will come into your house through that dog door. So raccoons are a real problem. They're cute, but they're a real problem. Any other questions?
I thought I saw a hand raised for a moment, but maybe.
There is another question from Mark. Mark said, I am very impressed. Thank you very much. I would really appreciate any possibility of an on-site prognosis as I try to transform to native and water-wise.
Oh, wow. That's really great. Thank you. I'm so glad that you found this program to be helpful. You can get some information on plantharmony.org, but I would really look at your local, let's see, there's so many resources in the town that you live in. I would look at, if it's City of San Mateo or City of Sunnyvale or whatever it is, I would look at those, the rebates, the plant lists, looking at going to Rescape, which is used to be Bay Friendly. There's a list of professionals that can help you, and they will practice all of the things that I've discussed tonight. Also, local master gardeners sometimes can have some resources or offer some support. And Quell is a qualified water efficient landscaper, and they also have a list of professionals that can help you design your new native garden.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. Any other questions? I don't see any. Oh, let's see.
And if any of you want to see a picture of those root aphids I was talking about, they're on my Instagram page. It's a couple photos back. They're kind of gross. I'm fascinated by new pests or pests that I know about. And when I actually see them, I am kind of like, there is a ick and factor, but then I get really intrigued and interested in like, wow, what's going on and why are they there? So yeah.
Hopefully I provided the correct resource, but we got a question about how to find Quell. And I looked it up. Is it the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper, QWEL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I
Yeah, that's
provided
a
that
super,
link.
they actually have a class coming up, Solano County, but it's virtual. So if there's any professionals out there, master gardeners, or if you just really want to learn a little bit more about how to set your irrigation up properly, it's an amazing class. It's free. If you want to become certified, you take the certification at the end, and I think it's like $35 or something. It's pretty great. I'm Quell certified. A lot of my colleagues are. It's an amazing class.
Awesome, good to know. Do we have any other questions while we still have Suzanne here? Oh, okay. Sunnyvale is Mark City, so perfect. Awesome, and now you're just getting responses for thanking you
Thank
and
you.
that it was very informative, which I agree.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate y'all joining. because it's fun. We all should be, yeah, it's fun. We're always learning. That's why I love the garden industries, because I'm learning something every single day. It just never stops. So kind of
We
fun.
actually have one more specific question
Yeah.
come in, an interesting one. Okay, have a raccoon pregnant that gets inside our house and gets stuck in something inside the house.
Oh, that's terrible. Well, is it like inside the wall or like in a closet or a crawl space? Um, that that you might need to reach out to animal control and they might be able to help you. Or I would reach out to your local fish and wildlife. Um, yeah, because the warden might come out and help you with that. That's a different, because that's kind of dangerous. These are wild animals and they can become reactive. So especially if there is a nest with young, um, and it's just a problem. You don't want that. So I would definitely reach out to animal control and or fish and wildlife.
Yeah, and I'm doing a little bit of research online. So the San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District has some information, which, like Suzanne is saying, is referring you to reach out to the Peninsula Humane Society or California Fish and Wildlife.
Great.
And that's San Mateo County information. Not sure if you're in another Bay Area county, but I'm imagining it'd be similar. So reaching out to your local humane society, and then I'll drop the link in here to the California Fish and Wildlife.
Cool. Thank you. That's really helpful because yeah, these things happen, like a skunk will come underneath the crawl space under the house and nest. And it's like, oh my gosh, how do you manage that? There's things you can do. You can create one-way doors, which isn't difficult with that quarter or that hardware cloth. And then you have a door that only opens out. So they'll leave, but then they can't come back in. But if the babies are in there, that's a whole nother story. So it can get complicated, but there's ways to, there's ways to remove them safely and in a way that's humane. But then you now know you have to then seal up all of those cracks and crevices. And for those of you that don't have a raccoon that might be nesting in your house, I bet you're going to go out there and go, oh my gosh, I have to make sure I can seal up those, get some lattice or get some, poultry fencing to put around the foundation of the deck, things like that.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have any other questions? I think we might be ready to conclude. Thank you so much, Suzanne and Andrea. This was a lot of fun tonight, and yeah, you can all expect to hear from us in an email, and we'll be providing the recording and helpful links and things like that. So definitely keep an eye out for that email.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening. Thank you so much, Andrea and Izzy. It was great to work with you both tonight. It's a lot of fun. Enjoy your evening.
Have a good night.